Invasion. You're going about your day, everything's normal, and then, completely uninvited, a thought appears. Not a thought you were thinking about, a thought that just manifests, and it's disturbing, violent, sexual, the kind of thing you would never actually think, but there it is, fully formed, vivid, impossible to ignore, and now you're panicking because you can't get it out of your head. What if that thought means something? What if that's who you actually are? This is an intrusive thought, a sudden, disturbing mental image or idea that appears without warning and feels completely alien to your actual values and personality. But here's the thing, they're not rare. Most people experience them regularly. The difference is that most people don't panic about them. Most people recognize them as random neural noise. But if you fixate on them, if you try to suppress them, if you ask yourself, why did I think that? You activate a loop. The more you fight the thought, the more it returns. Your brain is now treating it as important. Because you're treating it as important, the psychological mechanism is brutal. Your brain has a threat detection system. When you experience a disturbing thought, your brain flags it as potentially dangerous, so you try to push it away. But suppression is impossible. The moment you try not to think about something, you've actually made it harder not to think about. It's like being told, don't think about a pink elephant. Now it's all you can see. For people with OCD, intrusive thoughts become a prison. They develop rituals and compulsions, trying to neutralize the thoughts, when the rituals themselves are what lock the thoughts in place. The scariest part is that the thought itself is meaningless. It doesn't represent your desires or beliefs. It's just your brain misfiring. But the fear response to the thought is real, and that fear is what makes it stick around. Spectating, you're living your life, but you're not in it. You're watching it, like you're a character in a movie about your own existence, but you're the audience. You can see yourself from outside your body. You're aware of your surroundings, but they feel distant, like they're behind a pane of glass. You're going through the motions, talking, moving, functioning, but you're not actually there. You're somewhere else, observing. This is depersonalization. Your consciousness has disconnected from your body, and it's absolutely terrifying the first time it happens. People often think they're having a psychotic break. They think they're dying. They think they're going insane, but they're not. It's a dissociative state, and it's more common than you'd think, especially during periods of high stress or trauma. What's happening neurologically is that your brain is doing something protective. When you're overwhelmed, when reality feels like too much, your prefrontal cortex, the part that grounds you in the present moment, essentially dials down. It's like your brain is saying, this is too much, I'm going to reduce the intensity of your experience. So it separates your consciousness from your body as a way to numb you. You feel less, you hurt less, but the side effect is that you also don't feel real. The cruel irony is that the fear of depersonalization often triggers more depersonalization. You start panicking about the feeling, and the panic reinforces the disconnection. But here's the thing, it passes. It always passes. Your brain eventually resets, and knowing that can actually help break the cycle. The simulation. You start noticing patterns. A song plays on the radio, and then you see the artist's name on a billboard. You think about someone, and they text you minutes later. You dream about a specific number, and you see it 3 times the next day. At first, it's a coincidence, but then it keeps happening, and you start to wonder, what if this isn't a coincidence? What if everything is orchestrated? What if you're in a simulation, and these are glitches in the code? What if the people around you are NPCs, not real people? This is the Truman Show delusion. Named after the movie, it's when someone becomes convinced that their reality is artificial, that they're being watched, that their life is a constructed scenario. The belief feels absolutely real. It's not paranoia exactly, because the person isn't necessarily afraid. They're just convinced that the reality they're experiencing isn't genuine, and the evidence they find is everywhere. The mechanism is pattern recognition gone haywire. Your brain is literally designed to find patterns. It's how you survive. But sometimes it finds patterns that aren't there. Clustering illusion, confirmation bias. You start selectively noticing things that fit the theory and ignoring everything else. And because your brain is so good at finding patterns, it can build an elaborate, seemingly logical framework to explain why the simulation theory makes sense. What makes this delusion particularly interesting is that in a strictly philosophical sense, there's no way to absolutely prove you're not in a simulation. So the belief, however false, has a weird logical appeal. The person experiencing it isn't stupid. They're just caught in a cascade of misinterpretation where their pattern recognition system has become a liability instead of an asset. Crossover. You see a word and it has a color, not because it's written in that color, but because the word itself just is that color. The number 7 is burgundy, the letter M is silver, and it's not metaphorical, it's not poetic. To you, it's literal. You experience the color as vividly as you experience the word, and when you hear music, you see shapes. A violin produces spirals. A trumpet creates jagged angles. The bass is thick, undulating waves. This is synesthesia, a neurological condition where stimulation of one sensory pathway automatically triggers experiences in another. Sight and sound cross. Letters and colors merge. Tastes have textures. For people with synesthesia, this is just how the world works. They didn't realize everyone else experienced reality differently until they mentioned it to someone. The mechanism is that in synesthetic brains, there's increased connectivity between different sensory regions. The signals that normally stay compartmentalized are bleeding across into each other, and it's not a hallucination, it's not imagination. Brain scans show real activation in the sensory cortex. Their brains are actually processing these cross-modal experiences. Here's what's wild. People with synesthesia have better memory. They have stronger pattern recognition. The cross-wiring that makes them experience the world differently also makes them better at certain cognitive tasks. It's like their brains found a loophole, a way to process more information by linking different sensory channels together. It's not a defect, it's a feature that most people don't have access to. You're doing something mundane, brushing your teeth, driving to work, sitting in class, and your mind just leaves. You drift into a fantasy, not a passing daydream, a complete alternate reality, vivid, detailed, emotionally engaging, a story where you're someone else, somewhere else, living a different life. And you stay there. Minutes pass, an hour passes. You're so deep in the fantasy that the real world becomes the background noise. This is maladaptive daydreaming, not the occasional daydream everyone has. This is compulsive, immersive escapism. The person recognizes it's a problem, but they can't stop. The fantasy world is more compelling than real life. It's more interesting, it feels safer, and the more they retreat into it, the more disconnected they become from actual reality. The psychological mechanism is avoidance. Usually, real-world pain or dissatisfaction is driving it. Loneliness, trauma, boredom, anxiety. The fantasy world offers relief. It offers control. In the fantasy, you get to be whoever you want. You get the outcomes you want. Nothing hurts. But the problem is that the more you escape into fantasy, the more real life deteriorates. You neglect responsibilities, you miss social connections, and then real life becomes even more painful, which makes the fantasy world even more appealing. It's a spiral. The scary part is how real the fantasies feel. Neurologically, your brain processes the imagined scenarios almost as vividly as it would process actual events. You're creating false memories. Your sense of what's actually happened versus what you've imagined starts to blur, and over time, the fantasy world can become more real to you than the actual world. Imposters. Your family looks the same, they sound the same, they act the same, but you know they're not your family. You look at your mother's face, and intellectually, you know this is your mother. But emotionally, something screams that she's a stranger wearing your mother's face. She's an imposter, a duplicate. The real person has been replaced. This is Capgras delusion, named after the psychiatrist who identified it. It's when someone becomes convinced that a person they know, usually someone close to them, has been replaced by an identical imposter. It's not that they look different, it's that there's no emotional connection. The recognition system works, but the emotional system doesn't, and the brain tries to make sense of that disconnect by concluding, this must not be who I think it is. The mechanism is a break between facial recognition and emotional response. Normally, when you see someone you love, two systems activate. One recognizes the face, and one activates emotional memory. You feel connected, but in Capgras, those systems are disconnected. The face is recognized, but the emotional response is absent. The person with Capgras experiences the uncanny valley on steroids. They're looking at someone familiar, but getting no emotional hit. So their brain solves the puzzle incorrectly. It must be an imposter. What's terrifying about this is that the person experiencing it is usually rational in every other way. They're not delusional in general, but in this specific circumstance, their brain has constructed a false narrative to explain a real mismatch in their sensory processing, and they can't be argued out of it because the narrative makes sense given what they're experiencing. The threshold. You're drifting off to sleep. Your conscious mind is fading. And then you see something, a figure at the foot of your bed, a shadow in the corner, something that shouldn't be there. You try to move, but you can't. Your body won't respond, and you're paralyzed, staring at this entity, unable to scream or move or do anything. It lasts seconds, maybe a minute, and then suddenly you snap back into full consciousness, and whatever you were seeing is gone. This is a hypnagogic hallucination, a hallucination that occurs in the liminal space between waking and sleeping, and it's profoundly disturbing because it feels completely real. You're not dreaming, you're aware, you're conscious, but you're also hallucinating. Your brain is generating sensory experiences that don't correspond to anything in your environment. What's happening is that you're caught between two brain states. Your visual cortex is still partially in dream mode, generating images, but your consciousness has come online, so you're experiencing the dream content while being aware that you're perceiving it. Your brain is trying to make sense of the images it's producing, so it constructs a narrative, usually something threatening. A presence, an intruder, something is watching you. The reason hypnagogic hallucinations often involve threatening figures is that your brain's threat detection system is particularly active during sleep transitions. When you can't move, when you're vulnerable, your ancient survival systems kick into high gear. What if something is actually there? Better to see a threat that isn't real than miss a threat that is. So it generates worst-case scenarios. Necromancy. Your hand doesn't belong to you. You know it's attached to your body. You can see it. You can move it, but it doesn't feel like yours. It feels like a foreign object, a limb that has died but remains attached. You might look at it and genuinely believe it's a corpse. That part of you is dead, that you're partially a living person and partially a corpse. This is Cotard's delusion, also called Cotard's syndrome. It's an extremely rare condition where someone becomes convinced that part of their body, or sometimes their entire body, is dead or doesn't exist. They might think their leg is rotting. They might believe their heart stopped beating. Some people with Cotard's believe they're entirely dead, that they're a zombie or a corpse that's somehow still moving. The mechanism is a profound disconnect between sensory input and emotional processing. The brain receives signals that the body part exists, but the emotional system isn't confirming ownership, so the brain constructs a narrative. If I don't feel connected to it, it must not be alive. It must be dead. And once the delusion takes hold, the person finds evidence everywhere. A slight temperature change becomes proof of necrosis. A discoloration becomes gangrene. What makes Cotard's absolutely haunting is that it often emerges after trauma or severe illness. The person's brain has essentially become a weapon against them. It's a defense mechanism that's become a prison. They're looking at their own body as if it's a foreign object, a corpse they're somehow inhabiting. The disconnect is so profound that no amount of evidence can convince them otherwise. Their subjective experience, the feeling of deadness, overrides all objective reality. Your brain is breaking down right now and you don't even know it. These glitches prove one thing: reality is way more fragile than you think. If you want to understand the weird corners of your mind, hit that subscribe button. New mind-bending videos drop every week that'll make you question everything.